Thank you. Good morning. My name is Emily. I'm a member of the organization Winnipeg Police Cause Harm, as well as a PhD candidate in sociology and criminology. My research focuses mostly on institutional and interpersonal sexual and gender-based violence. And I'm speaking today about the Winnipeg Police Service's Flight Operations Unit, specifically regarding claims the WPS has made about the need, benefits, and cost effectiveness of the police helicopter as it relates to calls for service, particularly in domestic incidents. The 2020 Flight Operations Unit report, which was, as Talia already mentioned, released to the public less than 24 hours ago, as well as the 2019 MNP review, makes many claims about the police helicopter's public benefits, including its ability to reduce crime, increase safety, and its lack of negative impact on our communities. As we've already heard in our own survey, many testimonies recount how the helicopter causes them significant distress, keeps them up at night, makes them feel surveilled in their own home, especially to newcomers and those who have moved here to escape war. Most of the helicopter's activities take place over the North End and downtown, whereas participants in MNP's survey, as cited on page 19, were predominantly located in western and eastern suburbs and corridors of the city. Whereas participants in our survey were predominantly from the downtown core and surrounding areas where the police helicopter predominantly operates. The 2020 Flight Operations Unit report claims that Air One was specifically selected for its low noise signature, and that noise pollution at its altitude of 1,000 feet or 304 meters produces fewer decibels than an idling transit bus. Our survey possesses no lack of experiential evidence that the Air One causes significant audible and physical disturbance, assuredly more than the everyday effects of an idling transit bus on Winnipeggers' well-being. The MNP report also states, and I quote, "Intuitively and anecdotally, the use of Air One is a time and resource saver, but the WPS does not consistently and in an easily retrievable fashion collect and analyze data to quantitatively prove it." Now, as a PhD student and as a social methodology instructor, I'm committed to rigorous and evidence-based knowledge informing research findings, both for myself and in social policy. And so in lieu of this being provided in the MNP report in this instance, I must rely on quantitative data that we do collect on the Air One and the issues it responds to in order to really understand the claim that the police helicopter's benefits outweigh its consequences for Winnipeggers. So quantitatively, we know that the police helicopter responded to 2,247 events in 2019 and 2,446 events in 2020. Of those, quote unquote, domestic incidents and well-being checks interchangeably straddle the line for the most common events in 2019 and 2020 that were attended by the Flight Operations Unit. 27 events in 2020 were for missing persons assist, representing 1.1% of total events in which the Flight Operations Unit was present. We also know that Canadian social service agencies are fielding almost double the number of domestic abuse reports as they did a year ago. According to Statistics Canada, in their 2019 statistical profile on police-reported family violence, Manitoba and Saskatchewan remained the provinces with the highest rates of police-reported family violence. And these are issues that predate the pandemic and have only been worsened by its conditions. As Stats Can reports, and I quote, "The onset of COVID-19 pandemic in Canada has brought lockdown measures, school closures, and job losses for many that raise concerns about the impact of these stressors on families and a possible increase in family violence," which is something that we've seen. As we have also heard from domestic violence service providers over the course of this last year, including Manitoba's Association for Women's Shelters, on how resources are being stretched exceedingly thin, trying to address the rising need of support, particularly for women and girls who face domestic violence. Of course, domestic violence is not merely a municipal or WPS issue, and I do want to acknowledge the steps that have been taken by WPS and Manitoba Justice in their joint partnership to launch a pilot project that will streamline access to victim services as well as the additional $88,000 in provincial funding earmarked to help support increasing demand on housing and shelter services for victims of family and domestic violence in Canada, or in Manitoba, excuse me. However, comparing these relative half measures to the $2.2 million in taxpayer money spent on the police helicopter in 2019, and knowledge that these costs are projected to rise every year due to maintenance, fuel costs, and crew salary increases, embitters a haunting conclusion that more money is being allocated for police to surveil domestic incidents than to fund proper shelter, housing, and non-punitive victim support. Funding a $2.2 million helicopter directly starves us as a community of the ability to properly fund the full array of housing, childcare, therapeutic, legal, and financial services that victims and survivors of domestic violence both need and deserve. Instead of launching the helicopter and calls for domestic situations, I'm more intrigued in querying how we might invest in real safety for victims and survivors by addressing crisis in the home through preventative and survivor-informed solutions, such as 24/7 access to housing support. In reviewing this data, I'm left to question then what resources the helicopter is actually saving, and importantly, at whose expense. Connected to this, I'm left to question how $2.2 million in taxpayer money towards Air One works in service of Indigenous justice or actioning the national inquiry into MMIWG and the TRC's calls to action. The bloated police budget actively hinders investment in real and proactive solutions to the problems that our city faces. Whether intuitive or anecdotal, there is little to no evidence that I can find to justify the expense and disturbance caused by the helicopter, by the police's own admission in their reports. It must be grounded permanently, sold, and have those funds permanently cut from the police budget to be used in order to fund life-sustaining services that bring value to our city and safety to victims of domestic violence. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Emily. Are there any questions of, Damon, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to kind of speak in support of some of what the presenter has had to say. There's truth in the commentary around the challenge we're facing in Canada now, and the growing and widening gap between those who have and those who have not. And it appears at times that individuals who work in the public service or in other places at times demand from society or expect privilege beyond what should be reasonable or fair. We have now for many years failed to provide to those Canadians who have suffered, as in the case of Indigenous peoples, incredible array of attack by the society, by the government on ourselves. And this is in the news now every day. The finding of the children, of 215 children who died in one residential school is just unacceptable from any perspective. And the pain of intergenerational effect on our families continues. And our society right now is getting in a deeper hole with these things every day. The free market system is not working for us. The wealth is going into individuals beyond imagination. A simple dream that every Canadian might have to own a home is becoming impossible. The system is out of control. And as individuals, we don't really think of the impact on others. And we demand more each year. We've talked at this table about the police budget. And for example, the negotiations between the city and the police association about annual increases in wage, salaries, and benefits. And it's clear, the indication is all we want more. We want more. We don't have enough. Well, try living on welfare. This country needs to share the wealth. And the Truth and Reconciliation is that the implementation of the Indian Act by Sir John A. Macdonald and his government in one stroke of a pen made us virtual slaves because we had no rights. We couldn't hire lawyers to protect our treaties. If we had been paid the royalties on the riches that have been taken from our land, we'd be richer than the sheiks in Saudi Arabia. We wouldn't need welfare. So that's the truth. And you have to accept it. And I will, going forward, you're going to hear from me in a very real way very soon. Because I'm tired of it. I'm 73 years old, and I still got to go out in the street and have someone direct racism at me or discrimination because I'm an Indigenous person. Our current government is starting to try to do something about these things, but it needs the support of the majority of Canadians. And I remain hopeful that the majority of Canadians are not racist, that it is truly a high level of ignorance about the truth that I just spoke to you. So think about what I said today, and maybe working together going forward, we can adopt some new policies and some new actions that will bring some positive change to our situation. If you don't believe me, just come down to Higgins in Maine and see the camps that are there. It's sickening. This is Canada, one of the richest countries in the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Damon. Was there any specific questions with respect to the content that Emily Gerbrand provided this morning? Emily, you mentioned in your remarks something about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Can you go back to that statement, please?
Yes, I can repeat it. In regards to how much money, the 2.2 million in taxpayer money that goes towards the AR1, I'm left to question how this works in service of implementing the national inquiry into MMIWG's calls to action, particularly as we come up to a federal implementation plan coming into way, and what that means and how we reflect municipally on our spending.
Okay, thank you. I do want to acknowledge that our Chief Smythe, was one of the only chiefs across Canada that spoke in Ottawa at the hearing of missing and murdered women and Indigenous women and girls, and has been very vocal and an advocate around that issue here in Winnipeg and on the national stage. You're aware of that?
I am aware of that. I'm also aware of the police murder of Aisha Hudson and the police neglect in the case of Tina Fontaine.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other comments? Thank you for your time and your presentation this morning. Please have a great day.